Good evening, everybody. We apologize for the slight delay in the program, but the speaker and the chair were busy attending the memorial of Sai Baba, who unfortunately passed away a couple of days ago, day before yesterday night. So without much ado, let's begin the program. On behalf of the Alladi Memorial Trust, the Center for Human Rights, Dean, School of Social Sciences, and the University of Hyderabad, I welcome you all to this memorial lecture, which is held every year in the University of Hyderabad for the last decade or more. I would now request Professor Kodandram to come on to the dais. Sridhar, please escort Professor Kodandram to the dais. I now request Professor Haragopal to come on to the dais. May I request Professor Sridhar, Secretary of the Alladi Memorial Trust, to give a small bouquet to Professor Kodandram and to Professor Haragopal. It's my pleasure to introduce the Alladi Memorial Trust to people here. Many of you may know of the trust, but there may be many others who don't know much about the trust. So I beg pardon of those who know already about the trust, because they may feel I'm repeating a few things about the trust. The Alladi Memorial Trust was founded by Alladi Kuppuswamy, late Alladi Kuppuswamy, my father, Chief Justice of Andhra Pradesh High Court, in memory of his father, Alladi Krishnaswamy, who was one of the members of the drafting committee of the Constitution. The main aim of the Alladi in 1983, and since then we've been having the Alladi Memorial Lecture every year without fail, except for the COVID years, a couple of years during the COVID. The main aim of the Alladi Memorial Trust was to help indigent lawyers and also, but more importantly, to take the debates in law to the ordinary public, because many of us, and I can say that of myself, though I come from a family of lawyers, don't know the nitty-gritty of law. We don't understand many of the things that happen and many of the discussions that take place. So it was the idea of my father that the concepts in law should be taken to the ordinary public. And by ordinary public, of course, I also mean the intelligentsia of today who are present in this audience. In the first few years, first few decades, we had the lecture in Hyderabad. At one point, my father looked at the audience and said, "Oh my God, the audience, the average age of the audience is 60 plus. What am I doing giving this lecture, having these lectures delivered to these people?" And he said that what we need is to take it to the younger generation, because it's the younger generation who will have the opportunity to think and to change if they so desire. So at that time, we approached Professor Haragopal, who was in charge of the Center for Human Rights. And he very readily agreed. But the director at that time was Professor Sudarshan, I think he's here somewhere, who agreed to have this lecture every year. Since then, we have been having this lecture every year. The first lecture was, the first inaugural lecture of the Alladi Memorial Series was by Justice Hidayatullah, the then Vice President of India. I was telling somebody here, it was not more as a Vice President of India, but as somebody who knew my grandfather and who had great regard for my grandfather. He gave the lecture. I remember his saying that in his speech. Since then, we have had, I can't tell you because we have had 40-odd people. I don't want to name few and not name the others. We have had jurists, we have had activists, we have had people, academicians, and we have had a varied group of people. The last of this group of lecturers was Professor G.N. Devi, who gave a lecture in this very auditorium. And I must thank Professor Sharma for, that was the first time we interacted and we organized this seminar here. And we have another series of lectures called the Uma Maheshwaram Memorial Lecture, which deals with law and religion. And the first lecture was given by late Kannabiran, an associate of both of them, and for whom my father, Alladi Kuppuswamy, had a lot of respect. And Mr. Kannabiran used to always say that maybe Kuppuswamy and I don't see eye to eye on many subjects, but we have intense respect for each other. And that is the main thing about the Alladi Memorial Lecture. We have had people from various ideological positions. And the idea is that you must debate, you must talk, you must debate, you must argue, and then you can change your mind if you really want to. And that is what we have been in. In this connection, I would like to say a small thing that I remember Professor Haragopal telling me once when he came to our house. He saw me and my father arguing. And he said, I was shocked initially when I saw you and your father arguing so heatedly. But then I said, that has been the spirit in this house. My father and I may see differently about things, but the idea is that we argue, and then we may hold our own positions after the whole argument is over. And that is what a healthy democratic country should be. Have a healthy attitude towards debating. Now let me introduce the members of the Alladi Memorial Trust. After my father passed away, I took over as chair of the Alladi Memorial Trust. I'm Alladi Uma. And the secretary and treasurer is Professor M. Sridhar. And my brother, Professor Alladi Sitaram, who is here, who's retired from the Indian Statistical Institute, is the other member. We have 3 advisors, one of whom is present here, Mr. Manohar, who advises us on the issues of law, Professor Rakesh, who advises Dr. Rakesh Sahai, who advises us in the areas of medicine, because we also do medical camps with government schools, and Mr. C.K. Babu, who is an auditor. After all, a trust can't run without money. And we need a good auditor who will tell us how to run the thing. We are not a very rich trust, because this is basically a family trust. And well-wishers of my grandfather have helped us run this trust. So with not much more about the trust, we do help individual institutions, we do help individuals in matters of law, in matters of health and education. We run health camps in government schools with Spandana. We respond, of which Manohar here is one of the members of that organization, and NICE Hospital, NICE Foundation, which is a part of NICE Hospital in Masabtang. And now I wish to have the pleasure of introducing Professor Kodandram. What can I say? Before I mention Professor Kodandram, I must say a few words about the Center for Human Rights. Our first association with the Center for Human Rights was in 2002, when we had a seminar on 50 years of the Constitution. We had people like V.R. Krishna here and Venkatachalaya, who came and gave us, one gave the keynote and one gave the valedictory address. And we had a series of very good speakers at that time. The Center for Human Rights was founded, as you all know, in 1983, if I'm not wrong. And we've had dynamic directors, Professor Sudarshanam, Professor Chandrasekhar Rao, Professor Rupavat, and I've forgotten one more. Oh, and Professor Sharma, who's now taking care of the center. And the earlier dean, I think, Dr. Sudhakar Reddy, who was with us last year. I understand from Professor Sharma that he is now going to introduce some very interesting courses in the Center for Human Studies, Human Rights. We do want centers such as these at a time when many of our rights are being questioned. I would now like to introduce Professor Kodandram. How do I introduce such a person? I mean, everybody knows him. And if I say anything, it would be a kind of thing, you know, what the hell is she talking about? You know, all of us know about Professor Kodandram, the kind of work he did for the Telangana movement, the party he has founded in 2018. You know, if you think of the Telangana state, you cannot not think of Professor Kodandram. But all of you also know in the academic world that he was a professor of political science and he retired from the University of Osmania University. He's been on various missions. He's acted as a person who could negotiate between the government and people who are on the other side. He's been on various such things. But I'm not going to touch on this because you will get it. You're all, at least more than 50% of the people here are better, more savvy than me on using the computer and Googling, or now, you know, whatever method that you have of finding out about a person. But I want to share with you something about Professor Kodandram as a person to me, what he means to me. And I want to share this because when I read in the papers, when I watched the television, and I saw that Professor Kodandram was getting very much involved in the movement, I said, wonderful, here's a man of integrity, here's a man who stands for what he believes, here's a man who's soft but firm, who is a part of this movement. And we do want such honest people in the movement. So I go back to a little episode with which I will conclude, which will tell you how much I respect and honor him. And I'm really thankful to him for accepting to chair this. I know he accepted it also because of Professor Haragopal, but I would think that he accepted it because of me too, okay? I joined the university, Osmania University in 1985. And I was posted to Koti Women's College. It was there that I met Professor Kodandram first. I was the student advisor for the undergraduate students, and the college had just then introduced the postgraduate program. And Professor Kodandram was the student advisor of the postgraduate program. It was a women's college, but they decided that he could be it was still women only in the postgraduate also. And we had, for the first time, after many, many years, we had a students' union, much against the will of the establishment and the administration. We had a students' union. It had no political parties that were supporting, but the students wanted to get together. They wanted to have a leader. And the student union was an undergraduate union. The postgraduates did not really have a say in that union. So these students wanted to do something, get some money, and in those days we did not have cell phones, right, to click and get somebody's response. And I don't know, you know, like University of Hyderabad, if you want from here to go to the SIP building, it's a long walk. So we used to have a very long walk from our arts building to the commerce building. It used to take us almost 20-25 minutes to walk. So we decided that if we went there and didn't find a class, or if the class wanted to know whether the teacher was present, what do they do? So these students said, let us collect some money and give an intercom. between the two. Maybe many of you don't even know what an intercom is, They may not even know what a dialing phone is, many of you here. So we wanted this. So they said we'll have a fashion show. It's not a fashion show in the way in which we see the things. It was a show in which somebody gave them dresses, and they were fairly well-clad dresses, and they wanted to show. We invited people. People came from there. So there was a student in the MA called Samskriti. I remember the name quite well. This was so many years ago. I'm not so, I mean, 40 years ago, and I still have memory of it. And Samskriti said, you can't have, this is against women. You can't have this against women. So we had to negotiate this, and we had to tell her that this is not something where, as a woman, I too don't want the body of a woman to be flagrantly abused or anything like that. But there's not that. And then finally we had it. And I remember the tension we had with her, with the university and the principal. And for the first time, police were going to come. We had to negotiate, send the police away and all that. But she was the same smile, the same calmness that he has on his face right now. And he dealt with it. So I have always respected him for the way in which he could handle difficult situations. So this is just a little bit from a personal angle, but I'm sure you can make out what I'm trying to say. I won't say anything much more, but I would request now Professor Kodanram, the program sheet is there, to conduct the proceedings. Thank you so much.
I now request Professor Sridhar to introduce Professor Haragopal.
Good evening. Professor Haragopal. How does one introduce Professor Haragopal? A popular speaker, a person who stood for the human rights and who is an activist and a professor of political science. Professor Haragopal and Uma and I have had long association here in this very university. We worked together for several years. His teaching career started at the PG Center of Osmania University, in those days in Warangal, in 1970. And then he moved to the Political Science Department at the University of Hyderabad in 1985 and retired in 2006. He was then with the Tata Institute of Social Sciences between 2010 and 2013, and with the National Law School in Bangalore from 2013 to 2020. He was also visiting professor at various universities like Northeastern Hill University, Shillong, and at the Indian Institute of Advanced Studies, Shimla, and Uppsala University, Sweden. He lectured, as one would imagine somebody like Professor Haragopal to have lectured at various universities, University of London, Oxford University, and Cornell University. And as a human rights activist, he was invited by the United Nations for a seminar in Vienna. He was also a member of the Indian delegation to Canada to participate in the International Seminar on Human Rights in the Human Rights Foundation, Canada. He, after he started the Center for Human Rights at the University of Hyderabad, he started a journal called the Journal of Human Rights that ran for 10 years. And he edited this journal. A highly respected public intellectual, Professor Haragopal, he is so influential that he was an interlocutor with the extremists and the then Andhra Pradesh state, and several other times as well. And he was involved with the Save Education Committee of the erstwhile Andhra Pradesh and Telangana. He is an extremely popular speaker in the city and elsewhere in the state, and very often, there's nobody here who would not have seen him on the TV with various TV channels. He's introduced, and he's one of the most sought after person by the media, papers and media. With these few words of introduction, I would like you to wait for his talk this evening. Thank you so much.
Professor Haragopal will now garland the portrait of Dr. Alladi Krishna Swami. Professor G.N. Sai Baba, who passed away 2 days ago, was a student of this university. So it's appropriate that we observe 2 minutes silence in his memory. I request all of you to stand up and observe 2 minutes silence in memory of Professor Sai Baba. Thank you. Professor Haragopal will now deliver Dr. Alladi Memorial Lecture.
Professor Kodandram, Professor Uma, Professor Sridhar, and several dignitaries who are present in this hall. Several of them are known to me for a very long time. Now, Alladi Foundation has been organizing these lectures, as Uma said, for several times. And at some point of time, when Uma and Sridhar discussed, then Center for Human Rights at that point of time was very vibrant because of the global situation. Global context was immediately after collapse of Soviet Union, when we attended Vienna conference in 1993, myself, Kanaviran. That was the time when even Asmarov was Prime Minister, and of course he could not come because he was sick. So India was represented by Professor Manmohan Singh, and there was Vajpayee, Atal Bihari Vajpayee was there as leader of opposition. Several chief ministers were there. And that was the time that all the nations promised that they would protect human rights, because there was one understanding that Soviet Union collapsed because of lack of human rights, lack of freedom. That was the general opinion in Vienna. But there was quite a bit of difference. I'm starting with the context. The difference was that when Universal Declaration of Human Rights was being drafted, the representative of India who participated in the drafting committee, when they said Universal Declaration of Human Rights, she said that you call it better protocol instead of declaration. Declaration is an intention. Protocol will be a little more binding. And in 1993, when Manmohan Singh presented Indian point of view, he said, as a part of a written lecture, don't link development aid to the human rights record of a country. This was the stand of China and several other countries. They started arguing that human rights are Eurocentric. These standards cannot be observed by the developing countries. And therefore his argument was that when you give development aid to us, it was linked to the human rights record of the country. And now, of course, National Human Rights Commission is likely to be downgraded. 3 years they are deferring, but in March it's coming for evaluation. Every time the review committee is coming and Government of India is requesting them to defer it. But now this is the final going to be evaluation, and they are facing the threat of, once it is downgraded, we stop to be a part of the international, alliance of human rights. I mean, we reached a different point in the human rights record. But this difference between our stand in 1948 and in 1993 is very striking, that a country which took a stand that make human rights standards, binding to a nation saying, please don't, judge our standards. Now this difference is perhaps marks the changing context of human rights. Coming back to the Center for Human Rights, because it's also part of the, my presentation. Center for Human Rights, because there was a promise of all the nations that they will promote human rights education. It was a commitment of almost every nation. India made a very strong commitment that they will promote human rights education. So when we came back, we thought that we should have a Center for Human Rights because the global climate, national climate was so favorable for the human rights that we thought that we should have a center, and University Grants Commission was so, enthusiastic to promote the centers for human rights. And when we sent a proposal from the Department of Political Science, then the University Grants Commission was very happy. And because of our record, as Uma said, we have invited most dissenting voices of the country. When we invited Arundhati Roy to address, the then Vice Chancellor, when I went to him, saying that we are inviting Arundhati Roy, Vice Chancellor said, I would like to preside. And he presided over that particular meeting. And Uma was referring to this 50 years of Indian Constitution. There were several justices of the country, 4 Chief Justices of High Court. Justice Venkatachalaya visited our center thrice. When my journal was released, Venkatachalaya came to release. Then he was the chairman of the National Human Rights Commission. And of course, we have done, our Indian Journal of Human Rights was able to, attract the attention. John Hopkins University, several foreign universities were buying. Some, bookseller used to come all the way, fly, take about 30 journals, pay the money, take 30 journals, but he used to send them to the international, demand. But then, very interestingly, in 1999, when the Bharatiya Janata Party came to power, suddenly there was a shift. And I was the chairman of the Standing Committee on Human Rights, UGC Standing Committee. The UGC chairman just joined and he reported to the ministry, he came and stayed. Unfortunately, our committee was meeting that day, and he said, I would like to preside. And of course, if the chairman wants to preside, I said, sir, it's a great pleasure. Then he started saying, what is this human rights business? What is happening? This, there is too much of human rights, too much of, discussion. We must emphasize on duties. Stop this business of human rights. I was just taken aback that chairman saying that we should shift from rights to duties. Then, because he was a medical professor, and I can understand, and I started arguing, sir, every right entails a duty. There can't be any right without a duty. So he said, no, the duties are different, and change the, nomenclature. So next day, again, it was a 2-day meeting. Because there was a saying that Committee on Human Rights meeting, and next day, I find that Committee on Human Rights and Duties. Then I also had argued with him that, sir, what are the universal duties? There are universal rights defined by United Nations, but what are the universal duties? Then he said, respecting the national flag. Then he said, sir, in America, flag can be burnt as a part of the protest. So it's not that this is universally accepted that national flag should be. He was very unhappy with me. And when university was recognized as a center of excellence, huge money came, and Professor Ramarao was the Vice Chancellor, and he went to UGC. Then UGC chairman said that we'll give huge money, but Center for Human Rights, I will not give any money, and don't include Center for Human Rights. Vice Chancellor was a very decent person. He came back and said, Professor Haragopal, chairman is very upset. I said, sir, just I argued with him about the rights and duties, and I told him, sir, it's not, rights and duties are not dichotomous. He's unhappy with the way we argued. Then Professor Ramarao said, I can't show human right in the proposal. But what I will do is, I'll give you 19 lakhs hidden money, which I'll not show in the, proposal. So, in fact, it was very upsetting for us that suddenly, from a lot of enthusiasm of UGC to suddenly a change in the approach of University Grants Commission. Then, of course, again we had a happy time when Professor Thorat took over as the UGC chairman, because Thorat also invited him earlier for one of the seminars. So Professor Thorat rang up and he said that we will revive the entire center and will give you money, and it will be a nodal center for entire South India. We were supposed to monitor the human rights record for the entire South India. But so therefore, there are ups and downs as far as human rights education in this country is concerned. Now, the changing context, when I am saying changing context of human rights, it is also experiential, more than perhaps theoretical understanding of human rights. Because when I used to teach University of Hyderabad, the philosophical foundations of human rights and also political economy of human rights, partly it was theoretical, partly it was experiential. Because since I am associated with the civil rights movement in this state, for the last 1977, I joined Kodan. By then he was the member of the Andhra Pradesh Civil Liberties Committee. And both of us worked for a very long time in the civil rights movement. And combined state of Andhra Pradesh, I think, built such a vibrant movement of human rights, but nowhere in the world, perhaps, an organization lost 6 of its members, 6 of our colleagues were killed for the cause of human rights. Now, this sacrifice of the people, and of course, that legacy that our martyrs, our friends left, continues to, enliven the human rights movement and the civil rights movement. When Telangana movement was started, we were a combined state and we had a large membership from the other state. But APCLC was the first organization to recognize the aspirations of Telangana, and unanimously, although the members from the other state were very large number, but unanimously we said if the aspirations of a people, then I think we should respect aspirations of the people. And that's how APCLC extended full support. And of course, as a part of that, I went to Andhra State when emotions were running very high. So I went to Visakhapatnam to have a TV channel was carrying a debate. And Telangana point of view to be presented in Andhra and Andhra point of view in Telangana. Of course, one woman caught hold of me and said that you are arguing, we have respected you so much, you are arguing for a separate state. And then I said, madam, see, this is a backward region, relatively more backward. It is a neglected state. And therefore, there is a widespread aspiration in Telangana for a separate identity. And then, so as a part of the civil rights movement, she was so angry with me that how could you support an identity problem and all that. But the Andhra Pradesh civil liberties movement has had this type of commitment to the rights of the people. And we also had, when you are a part of a movement, that's what I used to teach in the class also. When you are part of a movement, to start with a particular objective, with certain goals. But if you are working with the people, people define what should be your agenda. You cannot stick to your own agenda, because the minute you go to the tribals, go to Dalits, to the different sections of the society, people will start asking the question, why you are not taking up this particular task? So with the result, although we started, and all human rights movement in the world, if it's like American Civil Liberties or the British, any Civil Liberties Association, it always starts when state starts exceeding limits of the law. When state itself starts violating and resorts to more and more coercive force rather than to the democratic consent of the people, then what happens is that a need arises in the country to, for human rights movement. Civil rights movement always is a product of the excesses of the state. People keep on arguing with us that why you only talk of coercive force, why do you talk only about the state, what about the violation of the other rights what about the violation of the extremist groups and all that. But then our argument has always been that the state derives its power from the law. That's what in the entire philosophical debate, where from state derives its power. State derives the power from the law, and where from the law comes? We the people of India. So law always is, at least theoretically, is a consent of the people. And when you pass a law, and that law which gives power to the coercive force, that the police, also limits the power. There can never be a law which gives arbitrary power to the state to use, arbitrary power. No state can ever exercise arbitrary power, because it's so organized, it's an organized force, state. That's what R.S. Sharma writes in the Stages of State Formation, that when do you say state arrived? When do you say state formation has taken place? He said, standing army is the marker of the origin of the state. That's what he writes in Stages of State Formation. Now, therefore, the organized force, when society, accepts, that force cannot be completely understood. Then, see, the police can go berserk. Therefore, we always say that the law gives the power and law limits the power. But the behavior of the state is that while it exercises that power, it does not, it stops, respecting the limits of the power. That has been our experience. So therefore, the state comes where the coercive force of the state, it is let loose. And we have been confronting the police. And at one point one of the DGP, when we met him, then he said, why are you using excessive? That's not the spirit of the law. You are a law enforcing agency. Then he said, that don't I have a right to life? I said, sir, you have a right to life. That's the reason why you always can fire or can use the lathi charge for your self-protection, because you also have right to life. But then, when do you use that force? When do you use that force? Then he said, look, Professor Haragopal, if I get a feeling that you are likely to attack me, I can fire. I said, sir, how do you know that what is there in my mind? He said, it's enough that if I get a feeling you are likely to attack me. See, that the state goes that far. And in the process, what happens, that the excessive force has become a marker now. And Sai Baba's case is perhaps an illustration of what has happened to the state. I was convener of the Sai Baba Defense Committee. Of course, with very illustrious people. Arundhati Roy is there, Prashant Bhushan is there, Nandita Narayan is there, Anand Teltumde is there, Gautam Navlakha is there in our committee. And we have been arguing, we have been, trying to see that Sai Baba somehow is rescued. A 90% disabled man, and see, the accusation is a part of the Maoist movement. And therefore, see, the state thinks that anybody having a Maoist link deserves this type of, treatment. But how can a 90% disabled man participate in any action? Now, he can't go to the forest and fight. This what was our argument. He has certain convictions. But freedom of thought, J.S. Mill argues in his book on liberty, unrestrained freedom of thought. Because the human history, human civilization has seen that how people for their creativity, people for their ideas suffered. Archimedes was shot dead. Bruno was burnt alive. Socrates was given poison. And therefore, because of this experience, human society decided that thought should never be controlled. Because any thought that is a product of a particular time may not be relevant to that time, but that may be relevant to the posterity. Galileo, Copernicus had to suffer. And they had suffered because they discovered the truth. But the Christian orthodoxy was not willing. If you see Story of Philosophy by Will Durant, so many philosophers suffered. Christian orthodoxy has punished so many people. Some of the people who were, who were proposing certain ideas were made to sleep, to lay down before the church. And people have to, put their feet and walk. And that's the suffering of the philosophers, some of the philosophers. The autonomy of a university, freedom of the university, today is a product of this great suffering and sacrifice that the people made for their convictions. And Sai Baba, yes, he had a political convictions. And you would be surprised if you read the judgment of the Gadchiroli court. Just unbelievable. The court writes that our hands are tied by the upa. Our hands, otherwise I would have given him a death punishment. A judgment. In a judgment where court is supposed to interpret the law, Justice Kuppaswamy or Justice Krishnaswamy, who drafted the fundamental rights, would have been shocked. Would have been shocked that if they heard that, the persons, exercising the freedom. But then universities are granted autonomy from the painful experience of the growing of intellect, creativity, creation of new ideas. And therefore, in the universities, they are created by a parliament, not by an executive order. Now, the latest amendment to the Statute of Central Universities, where ministry will be represented on your executive councils. Now, a great debate in JNU, big protest is going on against the amendment of the statute. Now, what has happened to the context? Why the context has been changing from time to time? And why have we reached a point where today the universities feel very constrained, whereas it is the university where, ideas have to grow, creativity, new ideas have to come. When actually University Center for Human Rights was started in University of Hyderabad, the file was moving in the university. One joint secretary said, human rights are very sensitive, very controversial. It is better that UGC is very careful. Joint secretary, it went to UGC chairman. When it went to UGC chairman said, if universities can't debate human rights, where else can they be debated? Chairman has written on the file and then sent it back. This type of debate keeps on. In the case of Sai Baba, see what has happened, he is a part of the university, Delhi University. And once he is a part of the Delhi University, of course he was not teaching, he was teaching literature. But he had the convictions. But as far as Sai Baba is concerned, he was a student of this university. And in those days, he didn't have wheelchair. He used to crawl. He used to have a gloves to his hands and he used to crawl. He used to come to some of our meetings, although he was a student of literature. I saw him crawling. But he did his MA from University of Hyderabad, then MPhil, then he did PhD. And he's a poet, he's a writer, and he's a fighter. Now that person, this 10 years, whatever effort we have made, the judiciary, the university, the jail, the police department, you go talk of any agency, University of Delhi was very unkind to him. We have been asking Delhi University that what is wrong if somebody has convictions. But university has terminated his services when we said he is still on trial. The case is still going on. You can't terminate services of somebody whose case is pending. But Delhi University just terminated his services. And then when you go to jail, for example, he was put in under cell. I spoke to the Nagpur. I went also to Nagpur. We had a dharna in Nagpur. And we went and met the jailer. Once they allowed me to meet him. But the jail, I was discussing with the jailer that jail is a reformatory institution. In our state, it's called correctional administration. Jail is not a punishing place. Punishment is over. And once person comes to jail, the purpose of putting a person in a prison or a criminal is to civilize, the democratize, and humanize and send him back to the normal society. That is the purpose of this jail. But completely, jail has forgotten. Jailer thinks he is there to punish. See, the entire understanding of institution, that whether it is the jail, whether it is the judiciary, or whether it is the university, whether it is the police department, now this is gradually, institutions are collapsing. And if the institutions do not perform their function, one thing people in power are not understanding, that if you do not respect the law yourself, then you are sending a message to the people that you don't need to respect the law. And when Kishaya Bhumagad, who were of course hanged during emergency, Kanebran was arguing their case. And High Court judge asked Kanebran, saying that Kanebran, they don't believe in the Constitution of India. They want to overthrow the system. Why have you come to the court? To defend their rights. Kanebran's argument was that values under trial are not their values. Values under trial are your values as a judge. Do you believe in the Indian Constitution? And where is it written in the Indian Constitution that those who do not believe in the Constitution are not entitled for protection of Constitution? Constitution can't be written like Bible and like Quran and so you can't write a Constitution. Because in the Quran he said, or in the Bible, he who does not believe in the heaven of God has no right to enter heaven. That can be the religion. That's a faith. But you can't write a Constitution where you say those who do not believe in the Constitution are not entitled for protection of Constitution. It's universally applicable. Proportionality of punishment is there. And the main reason why, the law defines is that, for example, prison, custody. See, the custody, the meaning of custody is protection, safety. When a person commits a crime, society may be so angry at that particular point of time that society may give more punishment to the person than what law defines. And in the process, what happens that, so because if there is a pickpocket in the medieval period, for pickpocketing, people were hanged. Thief was hanged in Britain publicly. And when they were being hanged publicly, the pickpocketers used to be very active. They used to pickpocket when the pickpocketer was being hanged. Then they understood that this type of punishment will not, threaten or will not, the criminal may not be, frightened by the punishment. Now, therefore, see, for a particular crime, what is the proportion punishment? This proportionality is very important. Now, that's why the law defines. Now, you can't say that, if somebody committed a crime, now today, we have been arguing this, that if you do not respect the law, if people take law into their hands because you have no respect for the law, then what happens to the system? Structures and institutions are built as a part of capitalist development, but institutions are built partly to check concentration of power, arbitrary authority of the state. And therefore there are checks and balances. There is a parliament, there is executive. Now the executive outreach is reaching a point where the legislature, judiciary, they are gradually getting weakened. But the consequences of what happens when you weaken your institutions, then if the faith of the people in the law is lost, then what happened in Bangladesh, what happened in Sri Lanka, can happen anywhere in the world. Because people will become lawless. And you can't tell the people respect the law when you yourself don't respect the law. So therefore, the entire human rights debate has been that rule of law is extremely important. And when you come to the Constitution of India, the Constitution of India is a product of freedom struggle. Absolutely, there is no doubt about that. It's a product of freedom struggle. And people like Alladi, they have enormously contributed because, of course, human rights debate has been going on 1928. Motilal Nehru prepared the fundamental rights and right to property he included. Then Jawaharlal, when he saw, then he said he was discussing with his father, debating that, why have you included right to property? Do you want a capitalist constitution for India? Then I believe the Motilal said, do you want a socialist constitution? It was an ideological debate between father and son. But anyway, right to property remained as a part of our fundamental right. This debate has been going on. And when the constitution was being drafted, of course, the freedom struggle, aspirations, global, struggles, the entire history, entire philosophical and theoretical debates that went into the, making of rights. There is a cumulative experience of humanity, civilizational. And therefore, you have, if you want to be a civilized society, you have to have a sort of constitution. But Indian constitution, because it is a part of the freedom struggle, as far as the rights are concerned, there are rights which are universally respected. I said that how we have accepted. Literally, Universal Declaration of Human Rights and Indian Constitution, if you see Article 3 to Article 19 in the Universal Declaration, it is our fundamental rights. From Article 19, the rest of the rights deal with our directive principles. Now, the Constitution of India is both. It provides a scheme. For example, it provides a goals of the society. It provides freedom. Constitution provides freedom in the fundamental right, justice in the part 4 of the Constitution. Now the preamble, of course, says liberty, equality. It's also very interesting that French Revolution, which has contributed the liberty, equality and fraternity, also had a right to resistance. Down the lane, something happened to right to resistance. And that has not become. When we went to Vienna, Canaveral, we argued with the UN. There was a UN drafting committee. Anybody can represent what do you want, what type of rights should be incorporated. A lot of debate goes on because 180 nations were there. And then we argued that in the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, there should be Article 31, right to resistance. Because if you do not have a right to resistance as a part of the human freedom, if the state exceeds the limits of the law, what can people do? So people should have a space, a democratic space to assert. And in the debate, if you see writings of Kanebran and Balagopal, both of them in my journal, they have written article, and both of them have argued that Constitution has an egalitarian perspective. Constitution definitely provides an egalitarian perspective. But Constitution does not provide any mechanism as to how to enforce egalitarian perspective, how to bring it about. Constitution has no mechanism. And therefore both of them argued that Constitution should have provided greater democratic space for people's movements. Because there is no only way that you can realize the fundamental freedoms if the people have greater space to assert, to articulate, to build movements. So Balgopal thinks that Constitution should have provided greater democratic space for movements, for struggles, for assertions. If you have not provided that space, how do you realize, the Part 4, goals of Part 4 of the Indian Constitution? How do you realize justice? So therefore the debates are going on, and civil rights movement is a part of that. But then the change in the world context, the global context, so Professor DN is here, the change from the capitalism has certain enlightenment. Marx himself writes in the Communist Manifesto that capitalism has performed the role of a revolution in the human history. He writes that it performed a revolution. Capitalism, because Marx thought that capitalism, brings people and, it emancipates people from material needs and all that. But Marx thought, of course, but Marx, as far as the human rights are concerned, it's a very interesting. Marx says that you say equality before the law and equal protection of the law. Marx argues if there is no equality in the concrete existence of the human being, how can they be equal before the law? And therefore he says it's a juridical illusion. It's a juridical, he also uses the word legal fiction. Now, in order to acquire equality, there has to be emancipatory politics. If you do not emancipate people, and you do not have the people's, struggles, how do you acquire equality in the society or justice or freedom? And therefore Marx says that rights are constraints on human freedom. It's a dialectical. He says they are constraints on human freedom, because what he argues is, if state says that I am giving you rights, that means you in principle you agree that the person who gives rights or the state which gives it can take it all away also. How can anybody give you right? For example, freedom of speech. I have a vocal cord, other species can't speak. I can speak because I have that capability. That human species have this, they have a language, they can communicate. Somebody comes and says, you can talk. You have a freedom of speech. Marx says that the minute they say that you have freedom of speech, which is so natural to human, body and human vocal cords, if somebody comes, then that somebody you can't speak. The minute you say you can speak, then you can say that you don't speak. That's how freedom of speech, which is a part of the, unique character of species, is constrained by the state through a law saying that you can speak. For Marx takes that position. But the later arguments have been that human rights, as Marx thought that they are not juridical illusion, human rights are a product of people's struggles. We always say when we teach human rights, it's a historic compromise between capital and labor. Every right is a compromise. Live and let live. And that's how the, labor, freedom to organize, freedom for association, freedom to fight, freedom to agitate, all these freedoms capital considered, saying because only with that bargaining capital can. Capital also knows that if there is no rule of law, the inequality, the wealth that the richer section enjoy, how do you legitimize the wealth? Why somebody has so much of wealth, somebody is so deprived? What is the explanation? Religion can provide an explanation. In fact, the religious congregation, the International Religious Congregation, they said that human rights is a domain of religion. Because once you say right, It's not rights and duties, right and wrong. Right and wrong can be always, debated within the ethical, mode. Because, ethically you define what is moral, what is not moral, what is right, what is wrong. So religious congregations said human rights legitimately belong to the domain of religion, because religion defines morality. So these debates are going on. In the human rights, lots of things are going on. Now, as far as the MP Singh, one of the, he was a vice chancellor, he wrote an article, Hinduist View of Human Rights. It's a small, in that he writes that duties, because as UGC chairman argued that this society should be duty-centric, duty is more important than right. But he argued that every duty performed by one is a right cast on the other. If I am performing duties, in fact, see, this is one way of defining, how duty and right. But then, in the document which we prepared for the University Grants when human rights was promoted, we prepared a document. So I also, the then chairman, we have argued, sir, when I am teaching in the class, when you ask me to teach duties, what duties you think I should teach? There are girls, there are Dalit boys, there are tribals in my class, there are minorities. What duties I should teach? Should I tell the girls that perform your traditional duty? Shall I tell the Dalits you put up with your, can I teach that? Then I said that rights and duties we will teach, but we will teach the inverse relation between rights and duties. Man has a duty towards woman, woman has a right against patriarchy. Minorities have a right, majority have a duty. Dalits have a right, upper caste have a duty. Now suppose you define duties and rights in this framework, where I sensitize the class, saying that the upper privileged classes must have that, obligation, or must have that historical duty of transforming the society. Now, therefore, this entire rights and duties and whatever we are defining, but capitalism conceding the rights, but neoliberalism is the problem. The difference between capitalism and neoliberalism is that while capitalism, of course, in the Wealth of Nations, Adam Smith argues that self-interest is the driving force, but he also talks of moral sentiments. But then, if you come further, once you come to neoliberalism, now the neoliberalism is arguing that axiomatic base of rights, should be, is not self-interest, but human being should be selfish. The books which are coming in defense of selfishness, and the books are arguing that the driving force for the material production can be when human beings selfish, and they're also arguing concern for the other human come from the weakness of the human being, not from the strength. A complete human being, a perfect human being is the one who is completely selfish. This shift in the axiomatic base is the problematic. As right now, we are facing this problem. Now, in fact, Einstein, see, again, we teach in a classroom. Einstein very interestingly argued that the atomistic individual, which the capitalism brought, while capitalism brought certain rights and all that, but it has made the human being an atomistic human being, and the individual is the bearer of rights, that atomistic human being. And Einstein said, as technology advances, human beings have to cooperate. We are leading towards more cooperation. Technology requires greater cooperation among the human beings. And therefore, the atomistic human being, that what he says is, there is a continuum, solitary human being, social being. It's a continuum. Each one of us is located on that continuum between the solitary human being and social being. Einstein says, modern technology, as it advances, human beings have become more social beings than atomistic beings, or solitary human beings. And then he says there will be a rupture if you keep on emphasizing on atomistic human being, and while technology requires too much of cooperation among the human beings, because these lights, this mic, everything, several human beings are working to facilitate this meeting. Now, if the lights fail, the meeting can't go on. It's all dependent. We are dependent on other human beings, perhaps not sometimes realized. So Einstein argues this. And then he says that we have to move to a socialist society. I would say a brilliant mind, perhaps the best mind in the 20th century, arguing for a socialist being. Now, this debate that is going on between the atomistic human being and the social being, neoliberalism has pushed the logic of atomistic human being to its extreme. And in the result, what is happening is that we can see the impact of neoliberalism. We can see that how the institutions are collapsing, how the human relations are ruptured, how the violence has increased, how the majority-minority relation, how the man and woman relation, how the Dalit, how the Adivasis, look at the position of all Adivasis areas are facing. And we have been arguing in the human rights movement that Adivasis, they have fought, last 200 years they have been fighting for protecting their forest and all that. Ever since East India Company entered and brought in the notion of eminent domain, Adivasis have been fighting. It's not that only Maoists are now entered and fighting. They have been fighting. They will continue to fight. Now, we in the human rights movement used to tell that they want to corporatize. They want to hand over the wealth to the corporate. This was argument. But now the Chhattisgarh Chief Minister in his latest interview on Economic Times, he clearly said, we want to hand over the minerals to the corporate, and whoever comes, whether it's the tree or a man, will eliminate. Now, they are saying that we'll eliminate. Home Minister saying that we'll eliminate human beings. Now, for what? Handing over the mineral wealth to the corporate. And why do you want? He says that we have to grow very fast. By 2047, we should become, America, and the per capita income $15,000. We want to go there. And therefore, they say that there has to be faster growth. But if you look at experience of some of the Latin American Bolivia, they have allowed their entire mineral wealth to be, exploited. Today, it's like something like a, grave. It has become like a grave. There is nothing left in Bolivia. See, how long you go on, exploiting our mineral wealth? It's a limited. Mineral wealth is not, it does not reproduce itself. There is a limited mineral wealth under the earth. We are not the last generation. We are not the last generation. There will be several generations to come. And how can one generation completely exploit its natural resources and, empty the earth? What will happen to subsequent generations? What is your obligation? And now, the argument in the Economic Times, one of the fellows has written, pension should be stopped. And his argument to stop the pension is, why should younger generation bear the burden of older generation? I wrote a letter to the editor that where from this wealth has come. Our generation produced the wealth. And the younger generation, and now you are saying younger generation has no obligation to the older generation. Therefore, pension should be stopped. The logic that is being now built is going to an extreme point. That therefore, the entire neoliberal model is given the human rights in India and the Constitution of India, while Constitution as an egalitarian view, neoliberalism is unequalizing. It's by the very logic it is unequalizing. When it goes on, growing, widening the inequalities, and then goes on exploiting, then the entire human rights, the Constitution of India has become a stumbling block. It has become a hurdle for the neoliberal capital, and therefore how to change the constitution. And therefore the space for the movements and struggles and freedom and autonomy of institutions is shrinking. That space is shrinking. And if the space shrinks and the inequalities grow, what will humanity do? So human rights are now raising certain fundamental questions that whether the model of development, this growth-centric model, Stiglitz has been latest book, Stiglitz has written that economic development and human freedom. And he said economics and good society. He said you can't ignore a conception of a good society. Economists can't just, close their eyes and say that we want growth. We want faster development. But if you go on saying that you want a faster development and, inequalities go on growing, he says bring back the notion of a good society. What is a good society? What type of human society would like to create? What type of younger generation should live? Older generations, Alladi, they left a rich legacy. They have left a rich legacy. But what is the legacy we want to leave for these, coming generations? What is our, obligation to future generations? Now, I think this is the question which has become central to the human rights debate. And neoliberalism is posing the challenge. And the Constitution is no longer referred to. In recent elections, we also, Kodanda, of course, he was directly involved, but we were campaigning. We never earlier campaigned in any election, but recent election we campaigned along with Justice Sudarshan Reddy and all of them. We never asked anybody to vote for a particular political party, but we went on talking of the preamble of the Constitution. And we wanted people to repeat. In a public meetings, we read preamble and people read the preamble. And we went on telling them this is the conception of a good society. Liberty, equality, fraternity, justice. Now these values are not products only Indian civilization, they are the products of human civilization. So we used to say that don't allow this entire vision of the society that Constitution has presented to be lost. So vote for any political party, but please remember that there is a Constitution which encodes certain noble values, and don't lose those values. Because values and institutionalization of values is very important for human society, for civilizational advancement. So the Constitution now has become central to the debate, to the electoral debate. Because the fear in the society is we may lose these constitutional values. If we lose this Constitution, what is likely to happen to human society, to Indian society? I think this is the concern of the human rights. There is so much of thought has gone into, philosophy has gone into, so much of creativity has gone into. And the only one point I would like to add is that in the human rights philosophical debate, while Marx attacked the atomistic individual, but the feminists are also arguing that atomistic individual, the construction of the male, is a patriarchal construction. Because they said that woman can never be an atomistic individual. There is a life dependent on life. And she has the pregnancy, she has a delivery, she has a lactation, life dependent on life. Now, how can you say human being can be atomistic? When, younger one dependent on the parents. Atomistic human being at the most can be man, but it can't be woman. And therefore, they are arguing that entire notion of human rights revolving around the atomistic individual. We are challenging the liberal theory. Because liberal theory emphasizes on atomistic individual. And of course, public and private. Rights are located in the public domain. Private life of the family is excluded. Now, women are arguing that if you exclude the family and what happens in the family, then what is that you are talking of human rights? Why do you exclude women from the, why do you exclude human rights of the private? Private also should be, that's how, of course, laws are now being passed. Family violence and the latest debate has been that whether, the marital rape, it has gone that far. So therefore, the feminists are arguing, Marxists are arguing, liberals are arguing, the different sections of are arguing. And within the Indian thought process, now of course, we have a long tradition, but Dr. Ambedkar. And Ambedkar for me represents because he is very prophetic in his writings. Particularly his, writing right up on revolution and counter-revolution. Ambedkar was very apprehensive. Constitution, yes, he was drafting, and people like Alladi have, Ambedkar himself acknowledged that the presence, gracious presence of, Alladi, he acknowledges. All of them have written the Constitution and they have given a Constitution. But Ambedkar said that Indian society is capable of performing counter-revolution. Because Buddhism which was an enlightened philosophy about 2,500 years back, where they said that God is inconsequential. The God is inconsequential for the human affairs. And he argued that Buddhism was a rebellious religion, which removed karma theory, dharma and all that. And Buddha said, for the suffering, for the dukkha, the cause is in the structure, not in the external, world. And therefore, he thought that Buddhism, but if Buddhism stayed back in India, if Buddhism struck its roots in India, I think Indian society would have been different. Where it has gone to Japan, it has gone to China, it has gone to different parts of the world. But today in India, we don't have any remnants of Buddhism. Dr. Ambedkar's fear was that if the Brahminism could, completely swallow Buddhism, it's a capacity that even if there is a greater consciousness in the society, if the Indian people, there is a greater critical consciousness in the society, I think there is a powerful ideology which can perform a counter-revolution. And perhaps what is happening now, not only in India, all over the world, look at the heads of the state, heads of the state of different parts of the world. It's all authoritarian symbols. All, the undemocratic symbols. They have emerged. Look at the 1950s or 1940s. All enlightened, Nazar, Tito, Jawaharlal Nehru. There were certain liberal, leaders. Today, you look at the world. Why it happened? It happened because the economic model of development that we are today following is a model of development which can't, tolerate egalitarianism, enlightenment, questioning, creativity, justice. All these values which human rights have been built on the philosophical base are under today trial. And perhaps, Ramchandra Guha has written when Bhima Koregaon case happened, he said that if Gandhi was alive, he would have taken back his ropes and would have gone to the court to defend the Bhima Koregaon people. That's what he has said. So today, what is happening is that something where all of us need to apply our mind. All of us have to apply our mind if we have to preserve certain egalitarian view of the society. I'll conclude by one, observation that Marx said that human civilization will be left only with two options. One is socialism or barbarism. If you do not have an egalitarian vision of the society, then society will become barbaric. I think some symptoms of barbarism we can also see today, what is happening in Israel, what they are doing to, bombarding children, killing the children, bombarding hospitals, bombarding schools. This is not a part of any war. Any war is supposed to be only with the organized force, but not on the civilian population. Look at Russia, which has inspired all of our generation. What has happened? The way they are handling Ukraine. Now, this entire culture today is a culture which is moving towards very barbaric, human society. If you want to, save the human society from the barbarism that is unfolding itself, I think human rights is one, weapon in the hands of the people to protect certain noble values. And we remember Alladi for this great contribution, and Alladi Foundation has been reminding the people again and again that there is certain commitment that Alladi people, that generation made. That commitment was further enriched. But today, we reached a point, a very critical point in human civilization. And where do we go from here? I think is a challenge to human rights, challenge to philosophy, challenge to our Sharmaji, Prof. Sharmaji has written on Hinduism, his entire work. If you see that he has been struggling to grapple the entire Hindu philosophy, Hindu ideology. I don't say that entire Hinduism is, if you read Radhakrishna's work on Hindu way of life or idealistic view of life, there is certain, positive part. But you can't allow religion to be vulgarized. Because religion is also a source of, meaning to life, or it defines the life in a particular way. But I think, therefore, I would say that these lectures are organized in University of Hyderabad. Partly Uma and Sridhar thought, and Alladi, Uma's father also thought that if they are organized in the university, younger generation will come. Because outside, the older generation was coming, but they thought that these lectures must benefit younger generation, so that younger generation will gradually realize its responsibility to, to society, to larger society. I hope this tradition set by the Alladi Foundation, and I feel greatly honored, I should tell you, just for Uma and Sridhar, I wouldn't have ventured to give this lecture, because the people sitting in the hall can be very intimidating to a person, because they are all knowledgeable people, they have life experience, but yet I perform this adventure thanks to Uma and Sridhar. I thank each one of you for giving me this rare opportunity of giving this lecture. Thank you very much.
At the outset, I would like to thank Alladi Trust for allowing me to preside over this function. Today's lecture was excellent. Professor Haragopal has raised the challenges that human rights movement is currently facing. I do vividly remember that people in their day-to-day life, they were not using the concept of rights. They were using the concept of justice, moral notions of right and wrong, correct and incorrect, in order to challenge and counter the authority that prevails over them, the cruel authority that prevails over them. They would say that it is unjust, I haven't committed anything wrong. I have been righteous in my conduct, so I shouldn't have been attacked in this fashion. But they contained, in their arguments, it contained the embryonic, in a very embryonic form, the conceptions of human rights. Retrieving them and helping them to protect the struggle, help the people to protect, whatever they have achieved, whatever they were striving to achieve. They're all striving to achieve dignity and self-respect. Help them obtain this kind of a new forms itself is a very challenging task. And the forces that exercise authority, they do not really tolerate. For them it is, kind of disturbing the order. It is violation of duties. So they would not encourage anyone to use the conceptions of rights. And when the civil rights movements translate them into practice, they always face resistance from the conservative forces who are basically justifying the existing social order. Now, in this context, we always use the notions of individual freedom, emancipation from dominance. The contemporary neoliberal philosophy is using the same notions against human rights. And that is a major challenge. How do you sustain the civil rights movement and continue the activity and defend the rights of the people is a major task in the current day situation. People are talking in terms of development, in terms of individuals' benefits. So they're using the same notions. Now this is a major problem that we encounter, and how do we overcome these challenges, and how do we carry forward the struggle for the rights of the people is a major task in the contemporary world. In many areas, this is the task that we have always been facing. Translating human rights into practice is not an easy task. While they existed in the Constitution, and the one good thing about the Indian Constitution is that they were written keeping the reality in mind, because they had a lot of experience about the social movements during the independence movement, And those ideals were translated into the Indian Constitution. Now, when we try to apply them and help people to protect their rights, it's always a challenge. Now, this challenge has further, intensified. The opposition from the conservative forces becomes even more difficult because of the neoliberal philosophy. So this is the context in which we are now working to protect, uphold, and popularize the fundamental rights in the Indian Constitution. Now, keeping this in mind, I would request you to ask questions. There would be some time for questions and answers, so please do ask questions. Professor Haragopal would take them. You can also comment. If someone can hand over the mic to, yeah.
Sir, my question is related to Telangana state. The current Chief Minister of Telangana made a statement related to the rights of people when it was certain that Congress party was going to form the government, that the Congress government would restore the rights of people in the state of Telangana. So I would like you to reflect on the statement made by Revant Reddy, because what happened in the state of Telangana for the last 10 years? Why is it that he made such statement? Thank you.
See, the question you have asked about Telangana, way back in 2009, 2010, I wrote an article in Economic and Political Weekly, Telangana People's Movement, Unfolding Political Culture, where my analysis was that Telangana has two strands. One is a democratic strand, and another is the mainstream politics. And this democratic content of the Telangana movement, parallel, political, mainstream political movement. If the democratic content of Telangana, blossoms, it moves forward, we will end up with a more democratized Telangana. But I said I am afraid that the manipulative mainstream politics may take over. This apprehension we had right from day one, that where is this movement going on? But our confidence was that, of course, Kodanram was in the forefront of the movement, that it was a mass participation. See, you go to any village, you find a camp, somebody going on fast, and it was a mass participation. Wherever we went to public meetings, thousands of people were attending the meeting. So I thought, at least some of us thought, that this mass participation will create a democratic culture where the outcome is very likely that it would be much more democratic because there is a mass culture. But the way the mainstream politics have taken over, see, that happened because Telangana was a part of the larger structure and all that, and the class nature of Telangana, the real estate, education mafia, health mafia, already it has grown in the combined state. So today we find, but at the same time, the last elections again we have seen. Now I was talking to Professor Kodanram because he said something like earthquake is happening, rejecting the politics of the 10 years. So somewhere this assertion is there. But then neoliberal model of development, see, has taken over in such a powerful way that whoever is coming to power, they are not able to, just circumvent that. They are a part of that. So I think it takes a little more time, but there is a very vibrant civil society in Telangana. See, in last election, the civil society played a very important role. So many organizations, have participated in that product, that civil society, that enlightened or the very, lively civil society is only safeguard. And I would say that Telangana movement, what it has done to Telangana, it has created a large number of civil society, democratic voices. You don't find this type of civil society in many states of India. When I was handling some of the kidnaps, there's no civil society to talk to. There's just absence of civil society. I was always think that if there are some Democrats with whom we can talk, consult the civil society, how to go about, how to negotiate between the two forces, the state and the revolutionaries, how to negotiate. We had nobody. So B.D. Sharma, who was the collector of the Bastar, who was a part of the bureaucracy, he was the collector of the Bastar. No IAS officer came to see him. No IAS officer came. No university teacher came to me. Nobody ever evinced any interest. So such a silence on the part of the Telangana is not that. Today, if something happens, there are a number of voices in Telangana. That's only, saving grace of Telangana. Say, Chakrapani Garu sitting here is an IAS officer. But the way even today he is going around for education, protecting the education, sensitizing people, continuously working, is a product of a particular, So therefore, I think a political process, what you said about Telangana, struggle of Telangana, the outcome of Telangana, see, it's a complex process. But all that I can tell you is that there is a vibrant civil society, which is also a product of a struggle. That
Good evening, sir. Good evening, sir. Thank you for that wonderful lecture. As you told that the issue of human rights arise from the issue of law, that state takes the power from law, and law also puts a limitation on the power of states. So there is a problem with the proceedings of law, that state law can be manipulated by the state, and on the behalf law made by the state on the behalf of the will of the people, but on that will it may be manipulated, and state takes the power from it will harm the people. So is there any debate, does any debate on that nature of proceeding of law? And my second question is that you are looking very concerned about that neoliberal model of development. Is there any alternate perspective, like at a time Bhutan was the country which introduced that global happiness index as alternate to GDP to measure the development, economic development in terms of GHI. So
see, I think alternatives always emerge from the experience of the society, right? And neoliberalism has its own limit, because it has only tremendous internal tensions. All over the world, there are social movements. All over the world, there are struggles of the people. Although the media completely, taken over by the corporate. Otherwise, it's not the. For example, in India, there are student movements in 200 universities, because I am working in the All India Forum for Right to Education. 200 universities. Nobody reports. what's happening in the universities. So therefore, the alternative emerges from the type of people's movement, because human being can never be completely silenced. The contradictions, produce its own alternatives. And that's the reason at least somebody like Stiglitz is going on arguing, don't forget a good society, bring back the notion of a good society. Amartya Sen has been arguing, humanize economics. So a lot of debate is going on. But I think it has only structural limit. The neoliberalism can't go beyond this particular point. All Adivasis in India, look at the entire tribal belt. From Jharkhand, Central Bihar, Gadchiroli, Orissa, Andhra, Telangana, Bihar. There are lots of struggles going on, Adivasi struggles. Dalits, for example. My hope is that woman, for example. Today she is no longer that type of woman. Now, but very surprisingly, as far as the present ideological disposition is concerned, now they are distributing a pamphlet. Can you imagine in the railway stations and all that? If a man beats the wife, what should she do? And the answer is that she should think that husband is liberating her from the sins that she committed in the previous life. And she should be grateful to husband for beating her so that she will be emancipated. Can you imagine 21st century having? You think any woman will accept that type of interpretation? The Dalit conscience, can you go back to the old, Dalit, subordination and subjugation? No. So if you look at the different sections of the society, children are no longer, the children of our kind. I have 2 granddaughters, very rebellious. They don't agree with you at all. So there is something happening in the society, right? This consciousness of emancipation, living with a dignity, self-respect, which have become, say, central values, I think will create a new society, an alternative society. But it takes time. But we can't give up the hope, because humanity learns from its own mistakes and humanity always progresses. Otherwise, at this age, it wouldn't be possible for us to go on talking if you become cynical. No. We are very hopeful that a better society, a more humane society will emerge from the present, tension, present conflict. And it is true that definitely today, whatever might be the model of development, we are far more conscious than many previous generations. My generation was lucky. We were lucky because universities were free and all that. Yes, things are really changing. But then the resistance that will come from the student, from the faculty, from the democratic forces, it always creates human beings never lose the battle. Human society will always advance. It will always have setbacks. We are trapped in a setback, but I am sure that alternatives will emerge from the same society, from the same people's movement. Yeah.
If there are no questions, then we can close the session. Yeah.
One of our students is in Gaza and he has expressed his thanks to you, sir. Right now, only on and off he is contacting. He was grateful that he could attend your human rights lecture. He is a faculty in the Islamic University of Gaza. He has done his MA and PhD from our university only, Mr. Mahmood.
Yeah.
Yes, sir. But unfortunately, he has to relocate 4 times. So he had been attending your lecture, though he was in
See,
different center.
as I was mentioning, that human rights education has ups and downs based on the change in the political the forces in India. As things stand today, yes, human rights definitely facing a challenge. Human rights education is facing a challenge because the context has changed. Context has changed because the model of development is so anti-people that it is trying to silence the different sections, and human rights is a part of that process. So Center for Human Rights has its ups and its downs. There was a period when, my God, University of Hyderabad, you wouldn't believe the type of things we were able to do in the University of Hyderabad. Today, every university is facing the problem. But then, the younger generation, which is denied of a quality education, will not keep quiet. So things will change. But I agree with you that as things stand today, there is definitely a setback. This setback is a part of a larger process. But then this model, as I said, has its limits. It can't go beyond this particular point. And then you will find from the society the aspiration for freedom, liberty, equality, dignity. Today, can you say that, the human being can live without dignity, without freedom? It is not possible. That the people are growing. Only thing is that how it gets into collective force and how the society articulates and how the balance of forces will be changed. I think that's the historical process. But I agree with you that my Human Rights Center had its glorious days and has its own, setbacks.
Lot of questions have been thrown up by Professor Haragopal. You may all have to think about them very seriously. The most important thing is that I have never seen people respecting Constitution so much. After 75 years, suddenly we realize that our only hope is the Constitution. And we all hold the Constitution in our hand, read the preamble every now and then, and express our commitment to the values enshrined in the preamble. So that commitment and that consciousness is something that we have achieved after 75 years of long struggle. Initially, when we talked about the Constitution, people laughed at it. One small anecdote. As I said, people were not using the conceptions of right, fundamental right, conceptions of law. They were saying, I have only been asking for whatever is due to me. And I am attacked by the policemen, beaten up. My property also has been destroyed. And then they would seek protection because what the police did is incorrect. The human rights movement is adding the conceptions of the law and rights to this struggle. It was telling people that you have a right to resist this kind of illegal detention. And Bojja Tarakam has written a very beautiful book called Polisulu Arrestu Cheste. What if police detain you? So the rights that are available to a detained person were explained elaborately in this small book. It was published. Lakhs of copies were sold out. So popular that even a local magazine carried it in a serial form. It's almost like Tom Paine's Rights of Mankind, which sold millions of copies. And in a similar fashion, Tarakam's book was also sold. And after reading this book, a young person, when confronted by a policeman, said, look, I have all these rights. You can't detain me. And, police said, how do you know all that? Now I have learnt everything about it through this book. So they asked him to show the book. They tore it down, thumped on it, and then they said, where are your rights? Now I can detain you. So this was how, the situation prevailed. We were quite influenced or in a protest against the proclamation of emergency, started fighting for human rights. That was the aspiration, but reality is different. People are caught in this web of power relations. So human rights is a way out of this oppression, discrimination. It has tremendous liberation potential, emancipatory potential. Recognizing those emancipatory potential of the human rights itself took a lot of time. We could theorize this concept only after 20 years of our struggle in the civil liberties movement. Then eventually we realized, this struggle has an existence of its own, a role of its own, independent of the other political movements, and started working and striving to popularize human rights. Now this is, the context. Slowly people learned this language and they started using this extensively in the course of their struggle. So that's how, they became so popular over a period of time. Now using them in their day-to-day struggle is not an easy task. They have learnt it and they started using it, and definitely that has transformed the life at the realm of civil society. What happens in the political realm, there is a dichotomy, and this dichotomy is what really matters. For people who are running the political realm, using the state power in order to appropriate resources for their own personal aggrandizement is what we see. So you have power in order to increase your wealth. Every institution is misused in order to appropriate wealth. In the course of this, people slowly realize that the Constitution is only hope. They use the Constitution and they are fighting against this authority. Now the Chief Minister Revanth Reddy's comment has to be seen in this light. So the civil society has been so vibrant. It has been seriously demanding democratization of social and economic life. So the political leaders also have to react to this. Sooner or later, they all have to react to this. So that is the context in which we also have to see that there is this bitter conflict between, on the one side, an authoritarian state, and on the other side, this democratic upsurge in this society. This democratic upsurge needs to understand the developments in political realm. It must theorize the existing developments. It must theorize the conceptions of human rights in this context. That is where you all have a role to play. If you can conceptualize and make them available to the people, they would be using them more extensively. And it is the only way to safeguard the Constitution in this country. And these are the alternatives that are slowly emerging. Don't think the West is very happy with the neoliberalism. Today they are not interested in neoliberalism. Today they are not interested in globalization of the world market. They are more interested in restraining them so that, their own dominance can be established. So that is another aspect of the current day world reality. It is in this particular context, Professor Haragopal's lecture is immensely important. It is very useful and something that Alladi Trust is trying to, carry forward. That task is, I think, today is fulfilled by this lecture. I am only urging you that the debate must continue. The debate must continue, and unfortunately, the theorization on human rights is not taking place very vigorously, as it was done in the 90s, when people like Haragopal, Kannabiran, they were writing extensively on these issues. Kannabiran would always say that to subvert the power and dominance, you have to use the Constitution very carefully in the most subversive fashion. He was able to do that. And therefore, he always talked about those cases where he has to face the strongest of the powers. He quoted them extensively and talked about it extensively. And he wrote extensively about it. I think, people like that we miss today. People who need to write about it. Dr. Haragopal also wrote extensively on various instances, how rights can be applied in the context of caste in Indian society, how they can be applied in the context of liberalization, and what role they can play is something that we have evolved over a period of time. In India, it's the human rights groups that played a very active role in popularizing the fundamental rights, right from the independence movement period. It was Dr. Ramanohar Lohia who wrote the first book on struggle for human rights, and subsequently many other treatises came into existence. And that, I think, is an attempt that today civil society is carrying forward. But unfortunately, theorization of these efforts has not been taking place. Today's lecture would fill that gap, and we must carry on this endeavor. And some very wonderful ideas have been thrown up by Professor Haragopal in his lecture. I thank him for this wonderful lecture. I now request Professor Sridhar to propose formal vote of thanks.
Before I propose a vote of thanks on behalf of the Alladi Memorial Trust, I would like to present it's my pleasant duty to propose a vote of thanks. The motto of our university, University of Hyderabad, is that which liberates is knowledge. And I think it's an appropriate motto that sums up in a way the lecture that we have heard. First, let me thank the audience for patiently waiting for the start of the lecture, a slightly delayed, and for staying on till the end. And I cannot thank Professor Kodandram adequately for so generously accepting our request to chair this lecture, especially at a time when he has become a member of the Legislative Council, and his time is so precious for the people, and he has spared his time to be with us today to chair this lecture, and for offering very valuable insights on the topic of this present day's lecture, the human rights philosophical perspectives and the changing context. And Professor Haragopal, what a brilliant lecture that was. We thank him for his profound talk that came out of his vast experience as a public intellectual, as a teacher, and a practitioner of human rights, and for his fundamental role as a grassroots level activist. We are beholden to you, Professor Haragopal, for offering this philosophical perspectives, and especially in talking about it in the changing context, global context, as well as Indian context. I thank Professor Jyotirmay Sharma and his office and his very efficient student volunteers who have helped us conduct this lecture this evening. I thank the personnel of the C.V. Raman Auditorium and the officials of the University of Hyderabad for allowing us to conduct this lecture and for offering full support for this activity. I hope you've all enjoyed a lecture that will, as Professor Kodanram put it, will take you a long time to think about the questions that Professor Haragopal has raised. It will take many days for you to think over them. Thank you all.